I do not condone the action or words of the characters or narrator of today's story. See, if there's one thing I've learned from studying Warhammer 40k lore so that I could finally make a video based around it, as many of my subscribers have requested, it's that Warhammer takes place in a very, very grim universe, like borderline comedically dark and grim. To contrast that, I had originally thought of mixing the characters with Disney characters or kids' TV characters or something like that, but I just had so many ideas that I really liked for mixing it with the universe of Batman, the Suicide Squad, and DC Comics in general. For the merging of these two universes, I tried to lean a little bit more Warhammer 40k because I've worked with Batman and DC Comics plenty of times on this channel, but I've never worked with Warhammer before. But whether you're a fan of Batman, Warhammer, or both, I think you're gonna enjoy the story and art in today's episode. So let's get into it, shall we? Let's go. Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show.
If there was one thing Brutalist Wayne despised more than a criminal, it was a heretic. Brutalist had seen what life was like in a city unruled by the hand of the God Emperor, His Holy Excellence Vandal Savage. Brutalist had been born into troubled, yet glorious times. Chaos had reigned on Earth for a century. Some humans were gaining unnatural abilities, factions of pitiful mortals were beginning to question the word of the long-praised immortal emperor, and unholy beings were even coming from beyond the stars to threaten the Imperium of Man. Some came merely to slay, some came to dethrone our holiness, but none could truly threaten those who followed the God Emperor's will. By the time Brutalist was 10 years old, the God Emperor's unification war had nearly completed. Wayne's home city of Gotham was one of the last places to embrace the importance of the God Emperor's teachings and rule. As such, it was a breeding ground for criminals and heretics alike, and a group of vile young men who fell into both categories took Brutalist's parents from him while he was still young. They were a wealthy, emperor-praising family who all wore pendants showing their dedication to their holiness, and the heretics were clearly threatened by this symbol. They slaughtered Wayne's parents in front of him. Brutalist fought back valiantly for his young age, even killing 2 of the bandits, but the rest beat him to near death and left him to die in the streets. Of course, just as Wayne's father taught him would happen if Brutalist was ever in danger, the God Emperor's hand fell upon his shoulder. Wayne awoke nearly a week later in the single Imperial outpost of Gotham with a bucket of frigid water splashed in his face. He came to, still in pain from his fight, but bandaged and healing. The man responsible for both his tended wounds, as well as the hurled bucket of water, was a cybernetically altered Imperial priest named Alfred Pendulous. He had been charged with watching over high-value subjects in Gotham and had witnessed Brutalist's parents' death, as well as the boy's impressive fight back against the heretics. As such, Pendulous had selected Wayne for a task, a grueling one, but one that would allow the boy to grow up and become an invaluable servant to his God Emperor. The Emperor's great Imperium of Man were trialing a program to help them raise a new breed of soldier to combat the more powerful forces arising against them. Starting that fateful day, Wayne became one of the first subjects to undergo a decade of ruthless training, so dangerous it threatened to kill him at near every turn. He fought through it, each moment keeping in his mind the image of the criminal heretics who'd struck his parents down, as well as that of the God Emperor, whose loyal subject had saved him for this holy task. By the end of this training, Wayne was a scarred mountain of a man who'd proven he was worthy of the next step. Imperial Priest Alfred, along with his Mechanicum clergyman, Lucius, undertook a week-long task of biologically altering Brutalist's body to further enhance his strength and speed and might, so he'd be ready to don the coming attire of his creed. Thanks to the decade of preparation, Wayne survived the surgery and the armor ritual was undertaken. He was encased in a suit that most men could not even hope to lift, but in spite of its weight, it only added to his power. He was given a choice of a wide array of weaponry for his suit, including some of the best guns the Imperium could offer, but he refused them, only taking melee weaponry, claiming he wanted the criminals and heretics he'd slay to get a good, close look at the form of the Emperor's fist as he ended their pitiful lives. Thereafter, Brutalist was unleashed onto the filth-strewn city of Gotham. From the symbol on his chest, many would come to know him as the Gothetic Bat. Some would call him the Dark Knight of the Emperor, but regardless of his name, all criminals and heretics alike would come to fear his wrath. After his first few years fighting as the Emperor's faithful knight in Gotham, Brutalist had aided Imperium forces enough to establish multiple Astra Militarum outposts across the city. These Imperial Guards became the core police force in this state, helping clean the streets of the filth of heresy. But there was a lot of scrubbing that needed done. These guards were helpful, but far from as capable as Brutalist. Some other subjects had completed his same training, such as a man 3 years Wayne's younger named Jean-Paul, who had since been dubbed by criminals of the city the Dark Angel Azrael. But more forces were still necessary. Brutalist had kept an eye on one potential budding warrior. The commissar of one of the city's Imperial Guard outposts, a man named James Gordos, had a daughter who wanted nothing more than to serve her god emperor, as Wayne did. She had been putting herself through rigorous training, trying to emulate the regimen Wayne and the other Knights of the Emperor had gone through. She'd been doing so for 3 years, and this young Barbaria Gordos was becoming quite the capable warrior. But Brutalist knew, at the time, the Emperor's disciples were accepting no female entrants to the program Brutalist had undergone. That, of course, would soon change. Brutalist requested updates from the commissar on his daughter as she continued her self-inflicted training to hone her form into a lethal weapon, and perhaps that training helped save her from what was to come. A faction of heretics who thought war to be an art that should be continued and embraced, called the Harlequins, had been a thorn in the side of the Imperial Guards for the entirety of their time in Gotham. They reveled in causing chaos and did all they could to vex the Emperor's forces. Brutalist had spent much time attempting to defeat the leaders of this faction, but they escaped him at every turn. Commissar Gordos had managed to lead some successful raids against Harlequin outposts, but he too could never catch their leaders. In fact, the first time he saw one in person was the night he showed up at the commissar's home. When a knock came at the door, Barbaria went to answer, and upon opening it, was faced with the troop master jester of the Harlequins, who shot her straight through the spine, before attempting to move past her to get to her commissar father. But the jester didn't get a foot past Barbaria. While she'd collapsed to the ground, unable to move her legs, she fought through the shock and pain and grabbed the troop master's leg, tripping him to the floor. She pulled herself onto his back and hammered her fists into his head before taking his weapon and filling him full of lead. And with that, one of the Harlequin leaders was no more. Barbaria had achieved something that even Brutalist had failed to, and yet she lay there on the floor dying from her wounds, and likely would have lost her life if Brutalist hadn't shown up soon after and made an executive decision. He took her to the Imperial priest, Pendulous. Brutalist humbly implored him to give her the same surgery he'd undergone to enhance his own power and become capable of donning his suit. He told the priest of her training, and while it was far from enough, he said that she was dying anyhow. If she died on the operating table, then so be it, but if she survived, she could become a new fist for the God Emperor to swing at the heretic filth of this city. Pendulous accepted these terms, and the surgery was undertaken on Barbaria. The commissar prayed to his god emperor the entire week, and after what felt like eternity, his prayers were answered. The surgery was successful. Not only was Barbaria's spine fully healed, she had strength and speed that near rivaled Wayne's. Barbaria was forged her own armor, and was the first of what would be called the Sisters of Battle. the female arm of the Emperor's Knight program, and Barbaria would come to instill fear in the swill of this city as Brutalist had before her. Of all the foul wretches to scourge the streets of Gotham, one of the most heinous to behold is the tyrannical Croc. Its origins are not fully known, but Brutalist and the Imperium have their theories. You see, there is a foul race of aliens that started finding their way to Earth some decades ago that seek only to kill, adapt, evolve, and kill more. They take on many variant forms, all with similar traits, and it is believed that they can infect a species with their own genes to help further their expansion. Prior to Imperium forces gaining strongholds in Gotham, a few such alien fiends had been spotted and eventually slain in the city, but it is believed that they were able to infect a young pregnant woman prior to their demise. This meant that her child would be born with an alien mutation. As one would expect of an emperor-fearing subject, she did the right thing, and when her mutated young was born, she immediately cast it into the streets to die. But its alien so-called enhancements allowed it to survive, slinking off to the sewers, living off rats and vermin. The boy grew up a savage, and unfortunately, some members of the Gotham underground were happy to embrace this beast. Unaware of his partial alien origins, the man was given the moniker of Croc, likening him to old myths of sewer alligators and crocodiles. He spent his first few decades of adult life working as muscle for whatever criminal group would pay or feed him, though his appetite usually called for more than they could offer. Since learning of this beast's existence, Brutalist and Barbaria have hunted the fiend, but its strange biology grants it might that rivals their own. Because of this, even groups such as the Harlequins have elicited the aid of the Croc in circumstances when they know they'll likely have run-ins with Brutalist, or other enhanced Imperium forces. Worse still, it seems the more the tyrannical Croc fights a mighty rival, the more his alien form takes over. He becomes stronger and more savage with each battle, and concerns continue to grow that he may soon be able to infect others and create a new rising faction of alien beasts in Gotham. The ignorant heretics have embraced this monster, unaware that it could essentially be bringing doom upon our people and world. Its life is a sign of infection and must be snuffed out before its threat can grow. There is another force that often slips through Brutalist's watch, and its origins are frankly an embarrassment to the Imperium of Man and our great Emperor. This being's name is Floyd Lockhelm, and he was meant to be the greatest assassin under the Emperor's rule. Even Brutalist hadn't been informed of the hidden Vindicare Temple, where another program was enacted to train lethal marksmen, who may not have the physical strength of a knight like Brutalist or Barbaria, but could take out a target with such precision at such a great distance that they'd never have to get into close combat. Lockhelm was meant to be the first of many. He'd been taken out of training for the Imperial Guards when his precision aim was noted and believed to be something that could be further enhanced. He was taken to the Vindicare Temple, the location of which is unknown to all save a small handful, and was made to further hone his marksman skills for years. He was granted weaponry available nowhere else in the Imperium of Man. While there have since been successful disciples forged under this Officio Assassinorum training, Floyd was not one of them. You see, as time went on, concerns arose about his mental fortitude. He grew mentally unwell, and it was thought he may even be considering taking his own life. Then all the work put into his training would have been for naught. They questioned his loyalty to the great emperor, which eventually proved a valid concern. They gave him mind-altering drugs in an attempt to right the course of his mind and put him on the path to loyal servitude, but even this did not take, and he eventually fled the temple, bringing with him much of the weaponry he'd trained with. Knowing Gotham to be one of the final cities to have ample heretic factions, Lockhelm ventured to it and became an assassin for hire, often being made to use his skills meant to aid the Emperor's forces against them. Brutalist has gone up against Lockhelm many times, and this has revealed a flaw in the Dark Knight's tactics. His refusal of ranged weaponry versus Lockhelm's adept shooting skills make for an uneven matchup. Still, Brutalist has sworn to apprehend Lockhelm at all costs, swearing he will answer for his betrayal, and whether willing or not, will be forced to eventually use his Emperor-granted skills to do bidding for the Imperium of Man. The precise way this will come about has yet to be determined, but a bold acolyte of the Emperor, Amandine Waller, is developing a way to force those who would fight against the God Emperor to enact his holy will.
I gotta say, both story and art-wise, I am very pleased with how today's video turned out. And I hope both Warhammer and Batman fans are as well. And because I'm still new to Warhammer lore, I would love some specific suggestions from people that know it better than I do about what characters could fit in with certain factions, whether I work with more Batman characters or different universes, or if there's specific characters from Warhammer that you'd like to see me take and put into some other pop culture franchise. Any ideas you got for me, I would very much appreciate them in the comments. And of course, if you're new to the channel, I don't, at the time of recording, have any more Warhammer stuff on here, but I do have plenty of Batman and DC Comics stuff. Some of my favorites are my famous cartoon characters on the Suicide Squad episodes, or most recently I did a new episode taking Batman and Spider-Man characters and fusing them together. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with today is another quote from Jim Rohn, one that I've actually heard for most of my life because my mom has been saying it since I was young. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So think about who you spend a lot of your time with and whether or not they're encouraging you to be kinder, happier, to grow, and to become the best version of yourself, and if you're doing the same for them. I hope that's inspiring to someone out there. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday. Goodbye.